A very lovely evening to all of you. Once again, I'm ever so thankful that you all could join us. We left off in our last Bible study with the end of the reigns of Hezekiah, Manasseh, and Ammon. Now we're going to be picking up in quite probably the best king of all the kings that reigned after King David. Hezekiah is the only one that I can really compare him to, and that is Josiah. Josiah was 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 30 and 1 years in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Jedidah, the daughter of Adiah of Bosketh. And Josiah did that which was right in the sight of the Lord, and walked in all the way of David his father, and turned not aside to the right hand or to the left. And it came to pass in the 18th year of King Josiah that the king sent Shaphan the son of Azaliah, the son of Meshullam, the scribe, to the house of the Lord, saying, Go up to Hilkiah the high priest, that he may sum the silver which is brought into the house of the Lord, which the keepers of the door have gathered of the people. Cambridge Commentary says this, with a view to a restoration of the temple, speaking of Josiah, a collection of money like that in the reign of Joash had been in progress. Josiah sets about to repair of all that had fallen into decay during the 57 years which had passed since the death of Hezekiah, his great-grandfather. And let them deliver it into the hand of the doers of the work, that have the oversight of the house of the Lord, and let them give it to the doers of the work which is in the house of the Lord, to repair the breaches of the house, unto carpenters and builders and masons, and to buy timber and hewn stone to repair the house. Howbeit there was no reckoning made with them of the money that was delivered into their hand, speaking of the workers of Solomon's temple, because they dealt faithfully, just as in the time of Joash. And Hilkiah the high priest said unto Shaphan the scribe, I have found the book of the law in the house of the Lord. And Hilkiah gave the book to Shaphan, and he read it. Cambridge once again. Josiah had succeeded his father at the age of 8, and in the previous 57 years the kingdom had twice over been deluged with all abominations of idolatry. The temple had been neglected, perhaps closed, during a large part of these years. The book of the law, which is the books of Moses, the first 5 books of the Bible, would certainly not be numerous. This would have been a very rare find, this book of the law. And Shaphan the scribe came to the king, and brought the king word again, and said, Thy servants have gathered the money that was found in the house, and have delivered it into the hand of them that do the work, that have the oversight of the house of the Lord. And Shaphan the scribe showed the king, saying, Hilkiah the priest hath delivered me a book. And Shaphan read it before the king. Pulpit Commentary says, Shaphan does not venture to characterize the book, as Hilkiah has done. He is not officially learned in the law, and he has only read a few passages of it. To him, therefore, it is only a book, which is a very specific showing of the people of the land at that time. Nearly everyone would have looked at like a Bible like we have today as just a book. That is how far that they had fallen from God and His Word. They knew of tradition, but not the meat value of it. Now notice before we go any further that it says how Shaphan read it before the king. It doesn't say that he read all the book before the king, but he just read specific parts of it, possibly Leviticus or Numbers, the law to him. And it came to pass when the king had heard the words of the book of the law that he rent his clothes. Matthew Henry says of this, the generality of the people were hardened and their hearts unhumbled, but Josiah's heart was tender. This is tenderness of heart. And thus he humbled himself before the Lord. I love this. Those who most fear God's wrath are least likely to feel it. And the king commanded Hilkiah the priest, and Ahikam the son of Shaphan, and Achbor the son of Micaiah, and Shaphan the scribe, and Azahiah, a servant of the king, saying, Go ye, inquire of the Lord for me, and for the people, and for all Judah, concerning the words of this book that is found, for great is the wrath of the Lord that is kindled against us, because our fathers have not hearkened unto the words of this book, to do according to all that which is written concerning us. So Hilkiah the priest, and Ahikam, and Achbor, and Shaphan, and Asahiah went unto Huldah the prophetess, the wife of Shallum, the son of Tikvah, the son of Harhaz, keeper of the wardrobe. Now she dwelt in Jerusalem in the college, and they communed with her. They're going to this prophetess to ask what should be done. But there's something kind of special about this prophetess, set apart from the others. Joseph Benson comments on that. This is the only mention we have of this prophetess, and certainly it tends much to her honor that she was consulted on this important occasion. This is a very important matter, when it is supposed that not only Jeremiah, but Zephaniah also was a prophet in Judah. So this prophetess must have been greatly honored within the land. And she said unto them, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, Tell the man that sent you to me, Thus saith the Lord, Behold, I will bring evil upon this place, and upon the inhabitants thereof, even all the words of the book which the king of Judah hath read, because they have forsaken me, and have burned incense unto other gods, that they might provoke me to anger with all the works of their hands. Therefore my wrath shall be kindled against this place, and shall not be quenched. But to the king of Judah, Josiah, which sent you to inquire of the Lord, thus shall ye say to him, Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, as touching the words which thou hast heard, because thine heart was tender, and thou hast humbled thyself before the Lord, when thou heardest what I spake against this place, and against the inhabitants thereof, that they should become a desolation and a curse, and hast rent thy clothes, and wept before me, I also have heard thee, saith the Lord. Behold, therefore, I will gather thee unto thy fathers, and thou shalt be gathered into thy grave in peace, and thine eyes shall not see all the evil which I will bring upon this place. And they brought the king word again. There's something to say in that verse. Actually, he's saying, You'll die before I strike the nation of Judah. So this tells us that there is worse than death that one can experience. Death is a merciful thing in this verse. God says, don't worry, you'll die before all this comes upon the place. There's a great lesson to learn in that. But Charles Ellicott does have a good comment on this verse. These words that he would go in peace, these words are limited by those which follow. Thine eyes shall not see all the evil. So Josiah wouldn't see all the evil. And Josiah was slain in battle, as the next chapter relates, but he was spared the greater calamity of witnessing the ruin of his people. And the king sent, chapter 23, and they gathered unto him all the elders of Judah and of Jerusalem. And the king went up into the house of the Lord, and all the men of Judah, and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem with him, and the priests and the prophets, and all the people, both small and great. And he read in their ears all the words of the book of the covenant, which was found in the house of the Lord. And the king stood by a pillar, and made a covenant before the Lord, to walk after the Lord, and to keep his commandments, and his testimonies, and his statutes with all their heart and all their soul, to perform the words of this covenant that were written in this book. And all the people stood to the covenant. And the king commanded Hilkiah the high priest, and the priests of the second order, and the keepers of the door, to bring forth out of the temple of the Lord all the vessels that were made for Baal, and for the grove, and for all the host of heaven. And he burned them without Jerusalem, meaning outside Jerusalem, in the fields of Kidron, and carried the ashes of them unto Bethel. So not only does Josiah crush these idols and into powder and ashes and such, the wood and the stone, but he also takes the ashes, the remains of them in that sense, to Bethel, which would have been the southernmost part of the northern kingdom. And I don't think that there's any strange thing in that, because Bethel was where Jeroboam, about 300 years before, had set up the very first idol of the two kingdoms. So really, all of this idolatry and all this wickedness and evil began at Bethel. And he put down the idolatrous priest, whom the kings of Judah had ordained to burn incense in the high places in the cities of Judah and in the places round about Jerusalem, them also that burned incense unto Baal, to the sun, and to the moon, and to the planets, and to all the host of heaven, which would be the stars. People worship anything. And he brought out the grove from the house of the Lord without Jerusalem, outside Jerusalem, unto the brook Kidron, and burned it at the brook Kidron, and stamped it small to powder, and cast the powder thereof upon the graves of the children of the people. Albert Barnes says the ashes, being polluted and polluting, were thrown upon graves, because there no one could come into contact with them, since graves were avoided as unclean places. And he brake down the houses of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord, where the women wove hangings for the grove. So they were actually having Sodomite orgies beside the temple. My goodness. Charles Ellicott comments on that. The Keddishim were males, talking about these sodomites. They were males, perhaps eunuchs, who prostituted themselves like women in honor of the grove that was set up, Asherah. The passage shows that the last infamy of Canaanite nature worship had been established in the very sanctuary of Jehovah. The revolt of Judah could go no farther. That's the furthest extent of idolatry that you can possibly get. But Josiah wipes all this out. Unlike Hezekiah, his great grandfather, Josiah just does a complete purge of all this idolatry, not only in Judah, but in Israel as well, as we'll see. And he brought all the priests out of the cities of Judah, the priests of the Lord, and defiled the high places where the priests had burned incense, from Geba to Beersheba, and break down the high places of the gates that were in the entering in of the gate of Joshua, the governor of the city, which were on a man's left hand at the gate of the city. Ellicott once again says, Josiah caused all the priests of the local sanctuaries of Jehovah to migrate to Jerusalem only, and polluted the high places to which they had been attached, in order to get rid of the illegitimate worship once for all. Nevertheless, the priests of the high places came not up to the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, but they did eat of the unleavened bread among their brethren. It was thought that they were unworthy to serve within Solomon's temple, because they had been at these ancient altars for so long that God didn't like it all. And he defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of the children of Hinnom, that no man might make his son or his daughter to pass through the fire to Moloch. So it's not far at all from Jerusalem itself, just right along the way. And this is where they would perform the child sacrifices. Well, he gets rid of that. And he took away the horses that the kings of Judah had given to the sun at the entering in of the house of the Lord by the chamber of Nathan-Melech, the chamberlain which was in the suburbs, and burned the chariots of the sun with fire. So he's getting rid of all this sun worship. They would take these chariots, and early in the morning, whenever the sun was rising, they would ride upon these chariots of the sun with their horses of the sun, and he gets rid of all that sun worship. These, Gill says, were not images of horses, as some have thought, but real living ones. And the kings that gave them for the service of the sun and for sacrifice to it very probably were Manasseh and Ammon, Josiah's father and grandfather. And the altars that were on the top of the upper chamber of Ahaz, which the kings of Judah had made, and the altars which Manasseh had made in the two courts of the house of the Lord, did the king beat down and break them down from thence, and cast the dust of them into the brook Kidron. What are these upper chambers right here? What's the point in tearing these down? Matthew Poole said these were upon the roof of the king's house. They were so mad upon their idols that they were not content with all their public high places and altars, but made others upon their housetops for the worship of the heavenly bodies. These people are just going insane with idolatry. We see this in all the kingdoms except pretty much the one in which serves the living God. They only serve but whenever they start this polytheism, the worship of many gods, they get many. So he's doing away with this sun worship, the star worship, planet worship, moon worship, grove worship, Baal worship. He's doing away with all of it. And the high places that were before Jerusalem, which were on the right hand of the mount of corruption, which Solomon the king of Israel had builded for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Zidonians, and for Chemosh, the abomination of the Moabites, and for Milcom, the abomination of the children of Ammon, did the king defile. So as you'll see right down here, the mount of corruption, even being part of, according to my research, part of the Mount Olivet, and he destroys that worship area as well. And he brake in pieces the images and cut down the groves and filled their places with the bones of men. Right there we're told how he defiles the places. Moreover, the altar that was at Bethel and the high place which Jeroboam the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, had made, both that altar and the high place he brake down and burned the high place and stamped it small to powder and burned the grove. So now not only is he having these ashes taken up, but he himself goes up to Bethel, where it all began, all this idolatry, and now he is crushing everything up there. And you have to remember how there are people there. This isn't a desolate place at Bethel. There's plenty of idolatry going on up there. He doesn't care. He's just taking it over. And as Josiah turned himself, meaning looking around, he spied the sepulchres that were there in the mount, and sent and took the bones out of the sepulchres and burned them upon the altar and polluted it according to the word of the Lord, which the man of God proclaimed, who proclaimed these words. If you'll remember when Jeroboam back in 1 Kings 13 began to worship these calves up in Israel at Bethel, if you'll remember how the man of God came up, and while he's burning this incense, the man of God cried against the altar and the word of the Lord, and said, O altar, altar, thus saith the Lord, behold, a child shall be born into the house of David, Josiah by name, and upon thee shall he offer the priests of the high places that burn incense upon thee, and men's bones shall be burnt upon thee. Then Josiah said, What title is that I see? Meaning a gravestone of sorts. And the men of the city told him, It is the sepulchre of the man of God, which came from Judah, and proclaimed these things that thou hast done against the altar of Bethel. And he said, Let him alone, the grave of the man of God. Let no man move his bones. So they let his bones alone with the bones of the prophet that came out of Samaria. And all the houses also of the high places that were in the cities of Samaria, which the kings of Israel had made to provoke the Lord to anger, Josiah took away and did to them according to all the acts that he had done in Bethel. And he slew all the priests of the high places that were there upon the altars, and burned men's bones upon them, and returned to Jerusalem. Talk about a zeal for God. I mean, Josiah, he just goes all out, nonstop, from beginning to end. This zeal does not cease. And the king commanded all the people, saying, Keep the Passover unto the Lord your God, as it is written in the book of this covenant. Surely there was not holden such a Passover from the days of the judges that judged Israel, nor in all the days of the kings of Israel, nor of the kings of Judah. This goes back even before David. This goes almost back to Moses or Joshua. I mean, this man is just, it's amazing. But in the 18th year of King Josiah, wherein this Passover was holden to the Lord in Jerusalem, Matthew Henry says, When they had cleared the country of the old leaven of idolatry, then they applied themselves to the keeping of the feast. There was not holden such a Passover in any of the foregoing reigns. The revival of a long neglected ordinance filled them with holy joy. Moreover, the workers with familiar spirits, and the wizards, and the images, and the idols, and all the abominations that were spied in the land of Judah and in Jerusalem did Josiah put away, that he might perform the words of the law which were written in the book that Hilkiah the priest found in the house of the Lord. And like unto him was there no king before him that turned to the Lord with all his heart, and with all his soul, and with all his might, according to all the law of Moses, neither after him arose there any like him. It says the same thing of his great-grandfather Hezekiah. This is a way of exalting him. Notwithstanding, the Lord turned not from the fierceness of his great wrath, wherewith his anger was kindled against Judah because of all the provocations that Manasseh had provoked him withal. And the Lord said, I will remove Judah also out of my sight, as I have removed Israel, and will cast off this city Jerusalem which I have chosen, and the house which I said, my name shall be there. Now the rest of the acts of Josiah and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Judah? In his days, now this is how he dies. In Josiah's days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, went up against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates, and King Josiah went against him, and he slew him at Megiddo when he had seen him. So the Pharaoh's making his way up to fight against the Assyrians, and on his way up, the king of Jerusalem, Josiah, goes, fights with him, and dies in the battle. And his servants carried him in a chariot dead from Megiddo, and brought him to Jerusalem, and buried him in his own sepulchre. And the people of the land took Jehoaz the son of Josiah, and anointed him, and made him king in his father's stead. Matthew Henry says this: the reforming King Josiah is cut off in the midst of his usefulness, in mercy to him, that he might not see the evil coming upon his kingdom, but in wrath to his people, for his death was an inlet to their desolations. Jehoaz was 23 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. And his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father had done. And Pharaoh Necho put him in bands at Riblah in the land of Hamath, that he might not reign in Jerusalem, and put the land to a tribute of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. That would have been about $2 to $3 million in today's money. A tribute's a yearly payment to not fight the kingdom, keep them away. And Pharaoh Necho made Eliakim, the son of Josiah, king in the room of Josiah his father, and turned his name to Jehoiakim. It's a strange thing. And took Jehoaz away, and he came to Egypt and died there. Speaking of Jehoaz. So Eliakim takes the place. He's the brother of the king. He takes his brother's place, and the Pharaoh changes his name to Jehoiakim. Why is that? Joseph Benson said, it was usual for conquerors to change the names of the persons they vanquished in war in testimony of their absolute power over them. Thus we find the king of Babylon changing the name Mattaniah into Zedekiah when he constituted him king of Judah, which we'll read about tomorrow. But in other comments, they said it's kind of like a parent, how a parent gets to name their children. Well, the Pharaoh now is naming the new king a name that he wants to name. And Jehoiakim gave the silver and the gold to Pharaoh, but he taxed the land to give the money according to the commandment of Pharaoh. He exacted the silver and the gold of the people of the land, of every one according to his taxation, to give it unto Pharaoh Necho. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Zebudah, the daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his fathers had done. And so here we go. We're winding it up now. The kingdom's it's on the verge of collapse, and even at this very moment, Josiah just barely makes it out of the picture. Josiah's last days were the best of days, and the last of days that they would actually get to see. But we'll come to the end of the kingdom of Judah tomorrow, Lord willing. God of peace be with you. Amen.